Good afternoon. I'm Beth Cooley, Assistant Vice President of State Legislative Affairs at CTIA. I'm pleased to welcome you to our next panel discussion of the CTIA policy track at GSMA Thrive North America, featuring the CTIA 5G Summit. This session, 5G Ready, Advancing U.S. Wireless Infrastructure Policy Through State and Local Leadership, brings together state and local leaders who pave the way for 5G deployment in their states and communities through policies that reflect a desire to attract new 5G investment, enable future economic growth, and bring more connectivity. Enacted over the past 4 years, 30 states and Puerto Rico's wireless infrastructure policy reforms have become an important part of ensuring our country's continued 5G innovation leadership. First, we'll hear from 2 state representatives who champion 5G legislation in their states of North Carolina and Colorado. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this discussion, Dr. Nicol Turner-Lee, Senior Fellow, Governance Studies, and Director, Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Turner-Lee researches public policy designed to enable equitable access to technology across the U.S. and to harness its powers to create change in communities across the world. She is an expert on the intersection of race, wealth, and technology within the context of civic engagement, criminal justice, and economic development. She's also the author of the forthcoming book on the U.S. digital divide, which will be available early 2021 from Brookings Press. Dr. Turner-Lee will be speaking with Representative Jason Saine from North Carolina and Representative Tracy Kraft-Tharp from Colorado. Representative Saine has served in the North Carolina General Assembly since 2011 and currently serves as Senior Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee and Vice Chair of the House Appropriations Information Technology Committee. Representative Saine has also been a longstanding advocate for innovation and has been a leader in bringing technology and new investments into North Carolina. Representative Tracy Kraft-Tharp has served in the Colorado General Assembly since 2012 and currently serves as the chair of the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee. Representative Kraft-Tharp is a champion of innovative technologies and is also passionate about encouraging economic development, workforce development, and increasing access to mental health services. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Turner-Lee.
Thank you so much, Beth, for the introduction. We're excited to dig into this topic. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that 5G technology is all over the place when we think about just this next iteration of what wireless will be able to do. And during this period, most particularly, we want to make sure that we bring high-speed mobile technologies to populations all over the world who are trying to figure out how to solve just basic and now much more complicated problems, like ensuring that people have access to education and employment and healthcare. All of that is being done online. So I think this conversation that we're going to have today is particularly important, and I thank you for introducing my distinguished and esteemed guests as we start this panel. I want to start with this first question for my distinguished representatives around, this idea of how did you get your respective states to sort of spearhead 5G and deploy what is going to be necessary to make this infrastructure work, which are small cells? So I know each of you represent pretty large places in terms of your geographic representation. So I would love to hear, and I'll start with you, Representative Saine, in terms of, in your situation, what did it take to actually get this off the ground? And what did you have to do to get all of those pizza box size antennas deployed so that we could actually get 5G in North Carolina?
Well, thank you for the question. And it has been an adventure. And it didn't happen overnight, as you might imagine. We actually started months before our session even started, meeting with stakeholders. We brought in everyone from the utility companies to the providers to the even cable providers. Anybody that might have an interest or an objection, municipalities, our county representation. So we brought them in and started having discussions, and we worked on language. And I told them we were going to do this and we were going to move forward, you could either be a dinner guest or be part of the meal. All opted to be dinner guests, and they wanted to participate and really kind of fine tune what we wanted to do. We took a lot of the concerns off the table before we ever went to the actual language. So that helped a lot, and it did take a lot of meetings and a lot of rooms with a lot of lawyers. But we were able to craft legislation that once introduced, though it had a long way to go through the legislative process. We introduced it in the House. We had multiple hearings in the House, and then on the Senate side, I was a senior finance chairman, and my good friends on the Senate side, even though they loved the bill, did put me through a little bit of hazing and made it a little complicated to get through. But in that, we had a greater vetting. I ended up, I think we went 7 committees in the Senate, a couple of committees in the House. But at the end of the day, we ended up with legislation that a whopping majority of the members could support, and that we had a lot of buy-in from communities across the state. So it went very well, but it was painstaking in terms of time, but it was time well spent by the end of it. Now we're seeing 5G being deployed. Citizens are happy. We've got a better process, and we don't have a lot of opposition out there in North Carolina.
I think that's actually really great lessons, and I'm hoping that we'll get back to some of those areas that you've mentioned as part of this conversation. Representative Kraft-Tharp, I know you also in Colorado were one of the first states to actually, deploy small cell legislation. Being first, as we've heard, doesn't always, come without cost. But I would love to hear, your experiences in terms of actually deploying small cells.
So our experience in putting through the legislation was similar to what Representative Saine was just talking about, in that it was meeting. First of all, we pulled together all the telecoms, got agreement with them, and then started meeting with the municipalities. What really helped is that the representative for the municipalities is a very close friend. He would call me at night and say, "Tracy, have you drank the Kool-Aid?" And it's like, "Ken, we're doing this. One way or another, we are doing this, and it all depends upon what the details are." So it was a lot of negotiation. Deployment of the cells is probably just as difficult and just as cumbersome as putting the legislation through.
And I want to go back to this idea, and you mentioned that you had a good friend that was actually able to help you sort of get through this legislative process. Given the fact that there are some people that are probably watching today where they may not have a good friend representative, right? I would love to hear from Representative Saine first, then yourself on, what is the legislative process like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What should we be thinking about or sharing with people who are interested in doing something very similar in their localities?
Great question. And part of it was, caucuses and legislative bodies are made up of very different people and very diverse. You get folks from all walks of life who I now work with at the legislative building, our different representatives, our different senators. They've all got different backgrounds. They're not all, tech geeks and interested in high-speed broadband. Some, as we've learned during COVID, that they can't quite even manage a Zoom meeting. They're getting better, but they're not technology experts. So really, the big part of the process was just educating my fellow members of why this was something that was needed, the way that we were going to go into the future, and the way that our state would be more competitive than maybe our neighbor, because we were trying to be first, or at least close to first, at deployment. So getting the buy-in from my colleagues was first and foremost what was necessary. Getting the language right in the legislation was very important. And then the number of hearings that we had, which also helped to educate the general public as they started to take notice. They're interested in it. I've got a 12-year-old son who's a gamer, a YouTuber. He wants as high speed as he can get. He needs it. I'm a gamer too, so I kind of also need it. But the fact that with 5G deployment, we could then do that. But as well as you mentioned in your introduction, we're looking at education and telemedicine and all the other things that are involved. Smart cities, working with our municipal leaders. I do have a good friend that's a city councilman in Charlotte, and he was already kind of out front. He's a tech guy. He was already out front preaching the benefits of what 5G investment in the city of Charlotte could be and what it would look like. And so really it had some buy-in from folks all across the state, knowing that they wanted to get to that place, and how do we get there? Really just an education campaign all the way around, making sure that folks understood what this would really mean for North Carolina.
Representative Kraft-Tharp, I mean, was that your similar experience? You had to go through some convincing, right, to get people to care about this?
I don't think we had to do any convincing to get people to care about it, because I think once you explain to people that downloading your movie would be like in 2 seconds, that being able to watch Netflix, being able to have all your iPads and your all of your equipment in your house, that you needed 5G to make everything run and everything run quickly. So the benefits, I think, were really easy for people to understand. What was difficult was to find the common ground. So it was being clear to the municipalities that this is going to happen. How it happens is in your hands, and we will leave that in your hands. So what our legislation said was, municipalities needed to accept that 5G was on its way. What it looked like, where it was, that was up to them. And so everybody needed to understand what some of the barriers were, some of the challenges, both for the municipalities, but also for the telecoms. So in that, I think, was the difficult piece in being able to find that compromise and find that common ground.
You actually shared, I think, a really great information in terms of getting there. What about post-passage? I'm curious to see what your stakeholders feel now that the legislation has been passed.
So there's been a lot of challenges since the legislation has been passed. A lot of the local municipalities have needed to pass ordinances to be able to adopt the legislation in their areas. And that has been a struggle. Really having the municipalities look at, how have their barriers been met. So largely what here in Colorado is what we've been doing is we've been building the small cell facilities. And that really is in 2 ways. One is in coexisting poles. So like Xcel, our utility company, do we put them on those poles or do we build new poles? And that process is entirely different. Probably our biggest accomplishment since the legislation passed is that the city of Denver has a map that maps out where all of the existing small cells are located. And while that seems like a small thing, that actually is a huge thing.
Now that is huge. Actually, I'm sitting over here nodding my head like a bobbing doll, because that is huge to know where those assets are. Representative Saine, to you. North Carolina has done this. What have been your post-passive challenges or anything that's gotten in the way of actually implementing the small cell infrastructure deployment?
Sure. No, we have been fortunate as some of our telecoms have said, we're going to invest. Right out of the gate, Charlotte and Raleigh were both announced as 2 cities that some of the major carriers were saying we're going to target, and we're going to go ahead and introduce this into the marketplace, which I then had folks responding back to me going, great, when do we get it in our town? When do we get it in our city? So I think the only real challenge has been that just can't get it here fast enough. Consumers want it. With so much that they use their phones and their devices, with so much that they use them for. There's only 3 people in our house and 2 dogs. The dogs are they're not quite there yet as far as utilizing the 5G connections, but in all seriousness, we use it so much and rely on fast signals and need fast signals. Really see more of folks just, if there's a frustration level, it's can you get it here sooner? Can you deploy it sooner? Can you get it to our town? Can you get it to our city? We don't have it yet in my city, in Lincolnton, which is just outside of the city of Charlotte, but it's making its way very quickly. My city council folks really want it. They said anything else we can do to prepare, so just be attractive to those that are going to be providing the service, and don't stand in their way. Don't give them too much regulatory trouble. Our bill dictates a lot of that. There's still some wiggle room, but we're seeing it. I mean, we really are seeing it. I'll share with you one quick story. I was standing outside of our legislative building with a news reporter who had reported on our bill as it went through. This is about a year later. She's standing there. She said, Representative Saine, what is that tower across the street there at the History Museum? I don't know what that is. I said, well, you remember that little 5G bill we talked about, a time or 2 last year? I said, that's a 5G tower. She goes, oh, that's a lot smaller than I thought. So, you know, folks sometimes don't even realize it's going up around them, and they're utilizing it and just don't know how it gets there. But that's, you know, for us, it's been a pretty good experience. So we haven't had a lot of pushback. It's just, can you deploy it fast enough for people's wants and desires?
Well, that brings me to a question, and then I want to go into these applications, because I think it's so interesting that we see people slowly, and I think someone said it earlier, drinking the Kool-Aid, but more so, we're going to talk about these applications, particularly in this pandemic, that are going to benefit by having some 5G technology. I mean, when you think about the partnerships, we haven't spoke specifically around the partnerships with wireless companies. I'm curious from both of you, what has that experience been like? I mean, have you had to really stay tight-knit with those wireless companies to make this happen? Start with you, Representative Saine, and then we'll go to Representative Kraft-Tharp just to keep the conversation going here.
Yeah, you know what, they've been great partners. And quite frankly, I probably got ahead of them a little bit, because I came out and said, I want to bring 5G to North Carolina before any of them actually come to talk to me about it. Now they quickly, you know, were knocking on my door, of course, when I announced that, but really helped me a lot in helping educate my fellow members. I talked about that a little bit, but also getting out front and kind of doing the media part of things and educating the general public, you know, getting out in their advertising so that folks kind of know what it is. When you say 5G, you know, the average layperson doesn't really necessarily know what that means, and really they don't have to know. The only thing they need to know is you're going to get really fast speeds on your device, and you can get it from wherever you were at within that network. And so that really has been a great help to me. You know, and we have our challenges. We've got one of the most connected states, but we've also got one of the most rural states. And so as you shift and you go, well, where will 5G go first? Probably in a denser area. But what that also allows is for the more rural areas to concentrate on other strategies to get high speeds in their areas. And so it's not a one or the other, it's really working in tandem. And having that education part of that with the wireless providers as partners meant a lot. And really with the facts and figures that you can throw, this is real, this is going to happen, this is what it really looks like.
Representative, on your side, did you have the same type of partnership and engagement with wireless companies as well?
We did, and I just want to say ditto to everything Representative Saine said. This would not have passed without the partnership of the telecoms. And actually in Colorado, what we did is we met with the telecoms all first so that they could all come to agreement around what worked best for Colorado. And then after all the telecoms came to an agreement, then we were able to work together with the municipalities.
You know, I have this question as we begin to wrap up our time. You know, this is a time we're having this conversation among a lot of global challenges, right? We have a pandemic that we're actually experiencing right now. Here in the United States, we've got racial inequities that are surfacing in a variety of spaces. You know, we think about 5G and we think about the applications that you thought about before and the applications that you're thinking about now. I'd love to hear from both of you on, you know, as this technology gets deployed, why is it going to be so important to your constituents to do all the things that we've been talking about, you know, through the course of this conversation and beyond, right, at this time?
Sure. Well, when you think about inequities that are out there, and as we look at communities that aren't connected, that haven't been able to adopt quickly, or we look at education or income levels or anything like that, one thing with 5G is it really does kind of level the playing field. If your community can have access just as well as a community that has far more resources, if we can deploy that out there and give folks access, particularly in a time of COVID, when so many students, including mine at home, I get to be the lunch provider, the teacher, the homeschooler, the principal, and everything in between, while we still work from home. Having high-speed signals has now become painfully obvious to folks and why it's important. Folks maybe who didn't think about it as so important in the past, they now know. But as we look at telemedicine, as we look at involving all communities and giving everyone access, getting a quicker deployment, getting the quicker rollout, I think one helps a lot of communications back and forth. It helps folks to better understand. We're all doing digital meetings nowadays, But even in times when maybe we could not do the meeting or we might not go to things, it's becoming more convenient for us, sometimes a little inconvenient if you want to get away from it all. But it also fosters a lot better understanding between people as there's more communications between those folks. So we've seen a lot of that. I think we'll see even more as 5G deploys all across our state and across the United States. And I think that's a real plus to what we're doing.
That's right. That's right. And Representative Kraft-Tharp, as you give us the last word on this, you've got a big effort here. And I think, you're one of the pioneers in this. Given the state of COVID, where do you think we're going to see 5G evolve to?
I don't know where we're going to see it evolve to, but I think it's totally integral in this new world that we're living. In the last 6 months of a world where we are inside our homes and communicating through technology to the outside, 5G becomes even more important. When you're looking at our healthcare, is really through technology. When you're looking at our education, is through technology. Our work is through technology. Our play, our recreation. I know I sit on Zoom all day, 7:30 in the morning, Zoom meetings all day long, in the evening. And if we don't have the newest technology, it just makes it worse. So I see us totally evolving, that a lot of this new world of working closely with technology is going to stay. And 5G is totally vital with that.
I want to thank both of you for this conversation. I think as people have been listening, they understand just how urgent it is for us to actually get everyone connected. And COVID has really shown just how important that is. I'm going to do a shameless plug. I'm writing on a book around the U.S. digital divide, and I can tell you 5G is very much a part of this conversation going forward. We got to make sure everybody's connected, folks, because the days of analog are definitely gone, and next generation wireless has rapidly changed the society in which we live. Thank you both for actually participating in this conversation, and we hope that this conversation also touches our global partners who are also trying to figure this out simultaneously as we make technology much more available and diffuse within our communities as well as our states and countries.
Thank you, Nicole, Representative Saine, and Representative Kraft-Tharp for that robust discussion on state wireless infrastructure policy. It's evident how forward-thinking policy can transform communities and truly drive investment. I think our next speaker will agree that that is true for both state and local level. I'm pleased to introduce and moderate our next conversation with a local leader who is helping to lead the way for innovation in his city, Craig Hopkins, Chief Information Officer and Director of Information Technology Services for the city of San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio is the 7th largest municipal corporation in the U.S. with over 13,000 employees. Craig is responsible for all information technology operations, application support, service delivery, cybersecurity, project management, and business relationship functions for 40 diverse departments across over 500 city facilities. Now, with all those responsibilities, I don't know when you have time to sleep, let alone join in on this discussion. So I want to thank you very much for being here today. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate being here.
So let's dive in, Craig. On our previous panel, we heard from legislators who sponsored legislation that streamlines next-generation wireless infrastructure, also called small cells. In that vein, San Antonio has been cited as a leader in facilitating that 5G deployment. Could you provide an overview of how the small cell permitting process works in your city?
Sure. At a very high level, first of all, in Texas, State Bill 1004 was passed in September of 2017 that set the rules and regulations for how the telecoms and the cities would work together. But primarily that process was preset for us for shot clocks, rates, and quality as we go through that permitting process. So I'm very proud to say, prior to my arrival, the team at the Transportation and Construction and the Office of Historical Preservation and the IT team reworked our entire process to match what the state bill asked us to do, and worked with the telecom providers hand in hand to make sure we had a good process to go through. So we follow the shot clock rules. We follow the cost and permitting requirements, but our primary responsibility is to go as fast as possible and to provide the service back to the telecoms as fast as possible. The primary reason for that is This is permits for small cells that go on the public right-of-way, either on a pole owned by the city or a pole owned by CPS Energy, or in some cases, as we know, fiber that has to go into the ground is supporting that as well. So we feel we have an obligation to maintain the public right-of-way, which has a lot to do with its appearance, but also its growth. But we want to do that in a partnership with the telecoms, following the rules as fast as possible.
Thank you so much for that overview, Craig. To that end, San Antonio has had great success in establishing a wireless deployment strategy and a permitting process that's considered to be a model. What advice would you give to other local governments that are beginning to establish their policies and procedures in this space?
Well, I think the tagline for that is it's all about the pole. At the end of the day, what the telecoms need access to is hanging something on a pole for the most part. And what we're mostly concerned about in the city is appearance, structure, safety, which is on the pole as well. So some of the two of the things that I'm very proud of what we've done in San Antonio is we have designed pole structures with our telecom partners. We've set pole standards, whether it's a light pole or a street pole. We've set those standards. We work on those standards together. We work together with our partners to put multiple nodes on a pole where appropriate, but do it in a way that it's both aesthetically pleasing and safe to our environment. So the pole is the primary thing. The second thing is metering the power. And so how you get power to the pole becomes a big issue, and that could be very large metering boxes that tear up your streets or new things that show up on the poles themselves. So we're being very innovative with our partners again here, looking for ways to put metering on the pole, metering underground, or even in some cases you've seen trash cans that are half metering, power metering, and half trash cans. So being innovative in those two things. But my biggest advice is build your design manual, work with your partners together in that design manual, and take care of the pole and the power first.
So let's pivot a bit and discuss how your city is leveraging connectivity and data sharing. Folks in the city or municipal space constantly hear the term smart city. So I've got a two-part question for you here, and you can take them in whatever order you choose. In your mind, what is a smart city? And can you tell me more about the unique approach you're taking with the Smart Cities Coalition and how you're utilizing shared assets and data to transform your city?
So here in San Antonio, about 2 years ago, we rebooted our whole Smart City program. We had started off like every other city, trying to be focused on technology and projects. And what we decided to go back to is to make it about the resident. And so we took a user-centered design approach to smart cities. And we said, let's focus on resident needs, and let's focus on the experiences we want to create for residents that help them improve their lives. We focused in on three things for our residents. We wanted to be resilient, we wanted to be connected, and we wanted to be inclusive. And so that doesn't tell us what technology and what smart city means. What it tells us is how we should behave in our community. So by doing that, we then set a coalition with 9 of the city agencies. So this shouldn't be a City of San Antonio organization only approach. If you're a resident of the city and you're new to the city, you don't know who picks up your garbage. You don't know where to pay your water bill. You probably don't know that your garbage is paid for on your water bill. And those are two different organizations that you have to work with. So we said we need to knock that down, and we need to build a coalition of all the municipal agencies in San Antonio. And we need to come together as if we're facing the residents at one time. And so the two things we said we wanted to do first was share assets and share data, and then create a common experience, back to focusing on the resident. So we all have different assets, right-of-way, poles, water towers, vertical assets, whatever they may be. So in practice, not always in contract, we have to work through the legalities of this in many ways, but in practice, all the CIOs said all assets should be shared for the greater good as we work through these projects. And the first step we did is we took data as an asset, and we built a smart city coalition and a single master agreement where we can share data across our organizations at a master agreement level and not have to write one-off contracts every time we do this. In practice, what this means is we're one team, and we want to face our community as one team and one mission going forward. And then right now, we're actually in the process of designing our one experience out to our residents as well. That may look like a mobile app, it might look like a web page, it might look like an experience when you call a 311 or a contact center. But the point is, they should be able to see all 9 of us as a coalition, as one team, and not have to worry about how to move across organizations. So our view is to be connected, inclusive, and resilient as a smart city is a unified one-team approach focused on our resident.
That's great and sounds really exciting, Craig. Now, if we could, let's turn to current events. The fact that we're having this conversation virtually speaks to that nearly overnight, adults and children alike had to figure out how to work and learn at home. This pandemic has changed life as we know it, but one sector in particular, education, has had to be completely reinvented in order to meet the times that we are living in. With schools going remote this fall, millions of students are now attending classes online. In San Antonio, you've taken a creative approach to make online education a reality. Can you speak about the city's project that is utilizing both the school district broadband network and private wireless networks to increase internet access for thousands of students?
So we've been working on this now for a couple of years inside of San Antonio, and San Antonio has a great digital divide, primarily on the west and south side of our community. So when COVID came about, it actually opened up the gap for the student population right in front of our eyes. And when students had to go home and do class from home, well, many already had devices, but many didn't. And even those who were given devices couldn't connect from home. So we took that as an opportunity to, by the way, never let a good crisis go to waste, take that opportunity to focus in on that population specifically. And what we did is we took our research and assessment we had done earlier, and it defined 50 physical neighborhoods around the entire city across 8 independent school districts, which are not part of the city organization here in San Antonio, and identified those 50 neighborhoods as being in the digital divide. And then we assessed in those 50 neighborhoods, how many students did we feel would be impacted by this? And our estimate right now is about 20,000 students we think are impacted in the digital divide doing school from home. So we worked with, as CARES Act money came down in the process, we set aside funds, which actually are general funds here in the city, to focus on a specific project to extend the school district's network out from their school into their neighborhoods so the kids could have exactly the same experience they would have in their classroom or in their library in their home. That was our intent. We're not creating public internet for all. What we're doing is using municipal resources and funds to extend the school's network out so they can have a private LTE connection. So what we expect is a student to be in their home, to be able to see in a drop-down menu of networks their school's network as if they were sitting in the classroom, connect to that network, have the same logins and permissions they would have in the school, have the same filters and everything that goes on because it's the school's network, and then have the exact same experience as if they were in the classroom. And so we're tactically providing hotspots, tactically extending Wi-Fi at our city facilities. Tactically, we're creating 12 community homework centers at our parks and recreation departments where kids can go and do homework there if they need to in the short term. But in the next month, we will have our first pilot LTE solution deployed across 6 neighborhoods and about 600 students. We'll be able to test out this new technology with the intent of rolling it out across all 50 neighborhoods in the next 2 years.
Thank you, Craig, for your insight on the exciting things happening with wireless connectivity in San Antonio. And thank you again to Dr. Turner-Lee, Representative Saine, and Representative Kraft-Tharp. And to everyone who tuned in, thank you for joining us for this important discussion about state and local wireless infrastructure policy. If you're interested in learning more about the importance of wireless and 5G, please visit ctia.org.